The Hawkeye women are on to the round of 32 after their victory against Holy Cross. We look at the matchup against West Virginia. Plus, the Hawkeye men's season comes to an end all today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Well, a basketball-heavy episode here today after the weekend that was. We'll talk a little bit about the Iowa men seeing their season come to a close after they fall on the road to Utah, and much of the same happening in that one. A loss on the road to Utah and a year that comes to an end that's going to lead to a whole lot of question marks coming up this offseason. We will break down Iowa West Virginia as the Iowa women will take on the Mountaineers in the second round matchup. Round of 32 coming up here this evening. We'll break down the matchup, what it's going to take for Iowa to punch their ticket back into the Sweet 16. And maybe move past what happened 2 years ago inside a Carver Hawkeye Arena. Of course, the final game for Caitlin Clark. Also, put a cap on things of what we saw on the mat over the weekend in the NCAA Wrestling Tournament, and we will get to that here a little bit later on. But let's open up with the ladies first after they get the victory against Holy Cross. The win, it was easy, as we anticipated, number 1 against the number 16. Now, there has been an upset that has happened years and years ago, well before we knew what a UMBC was or what we found out of Fairleigh Dickinson. There was one that happened in the women's side of things. That's when Harvard beat Stanford in a 116 matchup. But for the most part, you get what we saw on Saturday afternoon. And it was domination for Iowa in a game where Caitlin Clark didn't shoot it real well. 27 points, 10 assists, 8 rebounds, and the stat line looks good. 10 of 19 from the floor, 8 of 9 from the free throw line. But again, the three-point shooting, just 3 of 9, and really struggled with her shot. You saw Caitlin was revved up. And that was really, I think, one of my bigger takeaways here. You can see the importance that she's putting on this NCAA tournament. And it's important for everybody. It goes without saying, and not breaking any big-time news here. But she was revved up at a level that she isn't her best. When she is playing like that, when the frustrations, the emotions can get the best of her, that's not the Caitlin Clark that they need. That's always going to be a part of her game. There's always going to be a chip on her shoulder. There's always going to be some showmanship. There's going to be those kind of angles. But when she's playing angry, and that's what it felt like at times was happening on Saturday afternoon, that's not when Caitlin Clark is at her best. Now, you kind of look through here, and you look at the shooting, and the shooting from the outside here recently, it hasn't been great. 3 of 9 against Holy Cross. In the finale against Nebraska, 5 of 17 from behind the three-point arc. 4 of 11 against Michigan. That one's okay. But in comparison, 2 of 14 against Penn State in the first game of the Big Ten tournament. Go back to the regular season finale and that big win against Ohio State. By the way, the Buckeyes go down at the hands of Duke today in the NCAA tournament. She was 2 of 14 in the game against Penn State, then 6 of 17 against Ohio State. The last time that she shot better than 40% from behind the three-point arc, not a real high bar, certainly for Caitlin Clark. You got to go back to that Minnesota blowout that they had when she was 8 of 14 from behind the arc. Is it the pressure? Is it just a long season? Is it the physicality finally maybe taking a little bit of toll on her? Whatever the reason are, this has not been the same kind of efficient type of shooting from the outside from Caitlin Clark. Now, what we know with her game is it doesn't have to just be that. And we've seen this in the past when the shot's not falling. She has really shown that ability to go off the bounce, work off the screens, get inside, do some different things, even post up from time to time. And we'll get into the matchup here against West Virginia in just a little bit, but just something to keep an eye on there. This hasn't been the elite level Caitlin Clark that we've seen here recently. And there's been so much pressure on her. There's been so much that has been obviously on her shoulders throughout the course of the season. And it just keeps building and building and building and gets deeper and deeper into it. But in a day where Caitlin Clark was not at her best, a lot of other players stepped up in a big time way. Gabbie Marshall, again, shooting the ball well from the outside. And this is something that we've talked about for long stretches of this season. She needs to shoot the basketball well if I was going to have a chance of making a deep run. 3 of 7 from behind the arc. Going back to the Big Ten tournament, hit 2 in the games against Nebraska and Michigan, 4 against Penn State, had 4 against Ohio State and Minnesota. And that's what really revved her up and really seemed to ignite Gabbie Marshall and getting her back to the kind of player that we definitely know that she can be. Because when she's out there, we know what she is as a defender, and she gets tough assignments. And though I think at times maybe the on-ball defense is a little bit overstated, you go back at some of the games and you look back at, the matchup against Nebraska in that championship game and what she was able to do in the second half, really closing out on Jazz Shelley and then really slowing her down in the second half of the game. She's a good defender, but offensively, she needs to be able to help. She needs to be able to do some things, and she's shown that here over the last 3 weeks or so. Kate Martin with the double-double. And the glue, 15 and 14. She is exactly what this team needs. Need a big shot, she's going to get it. Need a big rebound, she's going to get it. She's just everywhere and so good for this team and doing the dirty work and guarding different players, bigger players, smaller players, doesn't matter. She's going to get a tough assignment. She's going to get her nose in there and doing well. And we've talked about Sita Falter throughout the course of this season. And in a way, I believe if I was going to hit the heights that we all want to see, if they're going to win the next 5 games and win a national championship, Sita Falter is going to have to be a big part of that. She is just such a different type of matchup, type of player that goes out there. You hate that the injury that Molly that led to this and Molly Davis being out again. Will we see her maybe next week? We'll see. Don't anticipate we're going to see her from all the reports that she's going to be out there in the game against West Virginia coming up this evening. But that's kind of where we are at this point. And Falter, because she has a well-rounded game, she can handle it. She can shoot it. She's a very good rebounder for her size. She can defend different types of players. Those are all good things for this team. Hannah Stuelke didn't play the second half. So I was listening to the game on the radio and listening to Rob Brooks on the call for that one. And they were a little bit surprised that she wasn't out there. Sound like a migraine. And with the big lead, they knew they were going to cruise against Holy Cross. And they did just that. So get her right as you can. You hate things like migraines. Those are things that definitely can linger, and hope everything's okay on that front. But Addison O'Grady in her stead maybe played her best game in a Hawkeye uniform. Certainly one of her best games of this season. 14 points, 5 rebounds. The thing that you love, though, and it's something we've talked about all season long with O'Grady, she needs to get that ball up quick, right? No thinking, just go upright with it. Do the things that we saw from Monica Sonano, that we saw going back with some of the great post players under Jan Jensen that I was been able to do. And that's such a huge component of it. Don't dribble, get the ball, go up, use the height, use that to your advantage. And definitely saw that out of O'Grady. I maintained it all year long. We're going to have her to probably win a game in this NCAA tournament. She's going to have to play well at some point if I was going to pull off a victory, and I still believe that. Even AJ Edinger came in, I thought she did some good things. And the matchup worked out really well. Even without Stuelke, both of them were able to come in there and do it. McCabe hit a 3. Not only that, Taylor McCabe was able to help out a couple of other ways, a couple of rebounds in the game. I think she had 3, a couple of assists. So you have all those things working together in a night where Caitlin wasn't her best. That is definitely good stuff there. We continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes, and we take a look at the West Virginia matchup, a look at the matchup against a Big 12 team that maybe could cause this Iowa team some problems. We'll talk about that. One of the best defensive teams that Iowa will have faced all season long is coming up in the final game at Carver Hawkeye Arena in the round of 32. We'll talk about that, plus the end of the season for the Hawkeye men as we continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpack can only be described as the Armada. An 11 seed making a run and into the Sweet 16. In fact, our only double-digit seed in the Sweet 16 on the men's side of things. They are one of the favorites out there. One of the teams coming out of nowhere to make a deep run, and they have done just that as an 11 seed. They're making a run just like you can make a run with an Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada to go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or you're just going with the one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, excuse me, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. That's right. The new menu is up there for futures, and take any of the 16 teams remaining to win the whole tournament. They have a wide range of anything that you're looking to bet over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Trent Condon back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. All right, let's get into the matchup coming up this evening against West Virginia. A couple of notes here. I mentioned is one of the better defensive teams that Iowa's faced all season long. In fact, the only team that kind of measures up with them defensively this season is the Kansas State team. We remember back early in the season, Iowa lost the game at Carver Hawkeye Arena, battling a big in there, and it just didn't go very well. Caitlin Clark really struggled also in that game, and nobody else was able to pick it up, and they lost. Now, they won the rematch down in Florida in the exempt tournament down there, and really dominated that game and pulled away for the victory against Kansas State. This West Virginia team, very good defensively. They're going to pressure you up and down the floor. They're going to make it incredibly difficult. You're going to see changing defenses as well. Maybe they'll throw some junk. Could we see a box and one type of thing, triangle and two, do something along those routes? Don't be surprised if you see that, but they're going to be switching between playing man and zone. We're going to see both sides of that, but pressure all over, and they work to force turnovers. So this season, they're giving up 57 points per game. Defensively on the 3-point line, this one was really eye-opening. Opponents for West Virginia this year are shooting just 29.7% from the 3-point line against the Mountaineers this year. They're third in the country in defensive efficiency, 60th offensively. Not a real big team, and I will get to that in a moment. And really the place more than anything that you can get them is that rebounding. 243rd in the country in rebound percentage. That means that Iowa, both on the offensive and defensive glass, they need to dominate this game. Keep the turnovers low. Goes without saying in any game, but we know turnovers can definitely build up, and we've seen that from Caitlin and the rest of this team at different times throughout the course of this season. Have to keep the turnovers low because that's what leads to the runs. When West Virginia has been able to pull off some upsets this year, that's when they've been at their best. They're going to dictate style. They're going to try to slow it down, but then they're going to try to pressure you and get those runs. And they're going to run off that pressure. That's what you're going to see out of West Virginia. The way they're built, it's the backcourt, and it's really quick physical guards. J.J. Quinn Early, their leading scorer, along with Jordan Harrison in the backcourt. Now, Quinn Early's 5'8", a great defender, but she's not real big. Same thing for Harrison. She's 5'6". So we're not talking about a lot of height. Out of the starting lineup, they go 5'8", 5'6", 5'9", 5'10", and then 6'3" in the middle with Blackson. So this is not a big team. This is not a team that is built that way and built like some of the teams that have given Iowa some trouble in the past. Look, it's a team from the Big 12. It's a team that has played well this season. You know, they've had opportunities. They pulled off some big wins throughout the course of the season. So it's not going to be an easy one, at least on the surface, but definitely this is an opponent that Iowa should beat, and I really think beat handily. They're 5-7 this season against Quadrant 1. Their best wins of the year. They beat Penn State earlier this year. We've seen Penn State. I know. They're okay, right? They're okay. Beat Kansas in their first game of conference play. Also had a couple of decent victories. They beat Iowa State. Did that at home this year. Who else they got wins against? Close loss against Baylor on the road, beat TCU, beat Oklahoma. Pretty good Sooner squad as well. Lost a tight one in overtime to Kansas State. Lost the rematch by a point against Baylor. This team coming in playing decent basketball. In the Big 12 tournament, they fell in the first game to Kansas State just by 3. So I don't think this is going to be a pushover, right? This is not going to be just roll out the basketball like it was against Holy Cross. If you don't play well, you're going to be fine. If Iowa doesn't play well in this game, they're going to be in for a fight. I mean, this is going to be a 4-quarter game if they don't play well. And after what we saw 2 years ago against Creighton, what we saw last year even against Georgia, I think this squad knows that it's not just about showing up and hoping for the best, right? That you have to play at a better level than what we've seen at different times in the past. And that's really kind of where we are at this point in time, is go out there, have an opportunity. Take a look here at the line from FanDuel. I'm bringing it up right now. Updated point spread. Iowa favored by 15.5 against West Virginia. Over-under sits at 163.5. So those are the numbers for the game. A little breakdown. Not a real deep team. Really just go 7 deep. I'll have one post player and then one guard off the bench. 7 deep. They're going to run you. And Iowa keep the turnovers down, dominate the glass. I think they're going to dominate this basketball game. One team that didn't dominate tonight, that was the Iowa Hawkeye men. Whew. Oh, boy. Here we are. Season is over, and much of the same continued in the game tonight against Utah. 91-82 is the final, and a final score that really wasn't indicative of the way this one went out. Iowa had a couple opportunities, cut it to 5 2 different times in the second half of the game. Never could get over the hump, and they never could get over the hump because they couldn't get a stop. Another one where you're just left wondering, well, who is this guy? Gabe Addison, kid from just north of us, up in Rochester. He erupts for a career-high 31 points. He does it by knocking down 7 3-pointers. As a team, Utah from behind the three-point arc goes 12 of 31, 38%, 12 three-pointers. Iowa 7 threes, 9 of 14, a no-show out of 2 of your better players, and here we are. Look, we're talking big picture, and that's really this conversation. It's a big picture question about Iowa basketball, because we can talk about next season and the excitement we saw from the 4 freshmen this year. Owen Freeman, stud. Brock Harding has got a chance. I think the pieces are there, and you continue to build up. Laje Dembele, you get excited about him. I'd probably say for the minimum is going to be okay. All right, there's your 4-player freshman class. Feel good. You bring back a couple other pieces. Does Tony Perkins come back for another year? Possibly. Could go that route. Is that what you're looking for? Is that what you need? We know that he's very close to the McCaffery family. Or is he looking around? Is he looking to get one final payday, big payday, that he's not going to get in Iowa City? Look, Iowa just does not have the funds to compete at the highest level in today's environment in basketball. In football, they're okay. They're not Alabama. They're not Ohio State. But they're in good shape. The basketball program is not when you're talking about the financials. And until that changes, until you either get Daddy Warbucks coming in that's going to spend to make this Iowa basketball compete at the highest level and go out there in the portal and be able to get some of those top-level guys, not just Hunter Dickinson like that commanded $1 million from Kansas. But even that next tier, those top names that you're seeing coming out of the mid-major ranks, and as teams fall out of the NCAA tournament, you're going to see more and more names in the portal. That next tier. What I was able to do, they're able to get Philip Bracha, Ben Krikke. If I was going to elevate, they're going to need more than that. And that's a scary thing, because without the money, you just can't get those guys. It's a non-starter. And if you got a half dozen teams that are all offering $300,000-$400,000, and you're, well, we got 50 for you. It's not going to work. The math doesn't work. You're not even going to get a return phone call when that's your reality financially in today's environment. And you talk about a guy like Tony Perkins. And Tony Perkins can look at this. This is going to be maybe his last opportunity to make big money as a basketball player. I mean, you could go off and play in Europe, maybe make a decent chunk of change and a good start to your life. You know, as a guy in your early 20s and making that kind of coin, that's all well and good. However, we're talking about the here and now. And with Iowa, what's going to change? What are they going to do to get back competing at the highest level? What are they going to do to break through and get to the second weekend? Is anything going to change? And as much as I respect Fran McCaffery and what he's done in maintaining this program and making them a competitor in the Big Ten year in and year out, not an easy thing to do in Iowa City. It just isn't. If they're going to get there, though, it has to get better. Well, this group is not going to suddenly get more athletic. They're not going to get to another level athletically. We're not going to suddenly see a team that is behemoths in the weight room and is going to be some kind of imposing team that way. You don't anticipate that. So you're left with this. What can you do on the floor to get you there? Offense, don't change a thing. Yeah, you'd like to see more shooting. And this was not, for Iowa standards, a great three-point shooting team this year, and yet they were still one of the best offenses in the country. Don't change a thing. However, on the defensive end of the floor, it has to be better. I don't know if it's as simple as going out there and hiring a defensive coach, something that I've been yelling about now for the better part of a decade, finding somebody that can help out on that end of the floor. If they even would be willing to do that, if Fran would be willing to do that, most importantly, is he going to give them free reign? Or are we going to fall back into the same tendencies that we've seen? Sherm Dillon looks great on the sideline. Puts on the good suit when they're out and about, always sharp dressed, looking good. He's now approaching 70 years old. And what is he doing as a recruiter? What is he doing as a scout? What is he doing to help this team elevate? That would be the easiest place to look. Is you see if Sherm is ready to retire and send him off to pasture, and you bring in some kind of young defensive coach, somebody that has that kind of background. I think that's the only thing that gives you hope that this can be different. Because next year, this will be good offensively. Next year, they'll probably be on the bubble again, hopefully on the right side of it, and they get into the tournament. And yes, even with a couple of breaks. But in the grand scheme of things, even if they do get a couple of breaks and make a run, it's not going to change the overall tenor. And speaking of that tenor, it's not good. I mean, the fan base, a huge majority of you guys are checked out. You're done. You know what this program is. You know what it's going to be. And you want something different. Even if different is worse, I know there's a big population out there that's fine with that. Just because you want to try, right? You want to try something else. We know what Fran's going to deliver. And you're ready for something else. And there are times that I could be right there with you. I'm still in Fran's corner. I still think we have a good basketball coach. And there's been some things that just have not gone their way come March. And you hate to throw that all out. But ultimately, it's a bottom line business. And the bottom line is for this program to be this deep into it and still not be able to make a second weekend, to get beat in the same kind of fashion they are always beat in your last game of the season this year. You piddle paddle your way forward in a Big Ten, get knocked off in the first game. I got to do the math again. Because not only has Fran lost a bunch of games, the first game in the conference tournament, a lot of those times he's been beat by worse seeds. It's just a year in, year out. It's frustrating, no doubt. Speaking of frustrating, fifth. A fifth in the country, that normally sounds pretty good. Not when you're talking about Iowa wrestling. We'll recap what we saw NCAA wrestling as we continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Find quality candidates, it is not easy. As a small business owner, I deal with this from time to time, and when I do, oh boy, I just groan. But with LinkedIn Jobs, it makes it so easy to find those quality candidates. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. It makes it the best place to hire and gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is so easy. In fact, with this many quality candidates, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses, you're wearing so many hats, you might not have the time or the resources to make that hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier, even launching a feature that's going to help you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Trent Condon back with you one final time here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. All right, fifth in wrestling for Iowa. For most places, it would be celebrated. In Iowa City, it is not. Now, we know this team was set behind the eight ball this year because of what happened with the gambling investigation. And as we found out here in the last couple of months, an investigation that had a whole lot of holes in it, but that's a conversation for another day. But because of that, Iowa was left behind. Iowa had some guys that would have been out there, likely All-Americans, that were not able to wrestle this season, and here they were. Now, the hope was that they could push up the podium, get in the top three, at least get a team trophy. Penn State is so clear and away, number one. Saw the number here recently. I think over the last 6 years, Iowa's had 4 national championships, 3 of them from Spencer Lee, while Penn State has had 30. Yeah, that's the gap that we're talking about here. And we can complain about the way that it's set up and how financially Penn State is at a completely different level than everybody else, but it is what it is. Here you are at Iowa, and it doesn't feel like you can chase down Penn State, that they have gone to another level. And it's a crappy place to be because same thing we talked about on the men's side. People are asking for a new coach, new blood in there, that the brand style just doesn't work in today's environment of collegiate wrestling anymore, that you need somebody new. Who? Who are you going to get? Who is going to be able to at least cut into that gap between Penn State and everybody else? I have not heard a good answer. If you have one, hit us up in the comment section and see if you got something there. The brightest spot, I should say, was Drake Ayala making a run to the championship. And though he was the aggressor in his match, he falls 7-2. Now, Iowa, the run continues, 34 consecutive years now that they've at least had a finalist in there, which is incredible in its own right. That's not what it is. It's frustrating. And it's another frustrating thing for me because I love wrestling. I love collegiate wrestling. I love high school wrestling. I'm a wrestling fan. I was a terrible wrestler, but I love it. I love the sport. And it gets swallowed up by the NCAA tournament. And now not just the men's side, but also the women's side. And it's great that ESPN is televising all these things, but wouldn't it be so much better if this thing was in the middle of April? Even make it a one-semester sport. I mean, certainly make it easier on the actual athletes to do it. I know that there's things with the international calendar that would make it tricky. But boy, when you're looking forward, when you're looking to the future, you look at a sport that is dying. We're seeing programs cut all across the country. We see the D1 level continue to diminish. And though there's been some upstarts, and we saw Little Rock have a couple of young guys that made some runs there and things like that, we're talking big picture here. It's not about the 18, 20,000 people that go to NCAA wrestling every year. You got them. We saw it last year. Numbers were down on television for the finals. What's it going to look like this year? Down again? We'll see. Those will come out earlier in the week. You have to do something for your sport. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to have to change some things, but that's what you have to do. When you're a niche sport, you have to think outside the lines. And unfortunately, there are not enough people that are willing to do that for this sport. It's a great sport, and it can be even better. And having a spotlight of its own in the middle of April when what we got going on after we get through the Masters is week 2, week 3 of the Major League Baseball season. Come on. It would be a great thing for the sport. Hopefully the powers that be wise up and are able to do that and make this sport what it absolutely should be, something that is spotlighted and celebrated on a much bigger national level. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We got a lot going on here on the Locked On Network. And if you're watching Fox Sports, ESPN, on your TV all day, turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Sports Network, your team every day with Locked On Sports Today. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll be back with you after tonight's matchup for you with Iowa and West Virginia. We'll break things down on that front and get you ready, hopefully, for a Sweet 16. Plus, a lot of football talk as we are into spring football. The Caden Proctor news gets weirder and weirder. We will continue to talk about that here as well. A lot of football talk and some basketball. The women looking to march through to the second weekend as Colorado will await them there. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.